The God of the gaps objection presupposes that materialistic explanations are always better.
It didn't feel like, well, hey, there's an absence of evidence. It was like, no. There's actual scientific evidence.
You walk into the British Museum and you see the Rosetta Stone there with this inscriptions. Well, what produced those inscriptions? I'd like to say it was an intelligent scribe, but I know that would be violating the rules of science. That would be committing a scribe of the gaps argument. So therefore, I'm going to have to say it was wind and erosion. Well, you've obviously missed something.
You know, I just got done with your most recent book, Return of the God Hypothesis, 3 scientific discoveries that reveal the mind behind the universe. Just give us a brief summary of the book and what motivated you to write this book.
In one way, because I've been thinking about the topic for almost 40 years. In another, more proximate sense, I had written 2 previous books, both of which were making arguments for design, intelligent design, based on discoveries in biology. And on the basis of those discoveries, I developed an argument for the idea that there was evidence for designing intelligence of some kind behind especially the information-bearing properties of living systems. And I didn't attempt at that point to make a God argument or to make a specifically theistic argument, but rather just made the point that we know from our uniform and repeated experience that whenever we see information-rich systems, invariably a mind has played a role. And so based on our uniform and repeated experience, we could infer from the evidence of the information present in, for example, the DNA molecule, but also in the whole information processing system and systems that are at work in living organisms, that we are looking at the product of a mind of some kind. My readers then wanted to know, well, who or what kind of a mind are we talking about? Are we talking about a space alien? Are we talking about an immanent intelligence within the cosmos? Or are we talking about a transcendent intelligence of the kind that, say, Jews and Christians have always ascribed to God? And so I actually think that question, and thought that question, still do, is accessible, judiciable through additional scientific evidence. And so whereas I looked only at the biological evidence in the first case, I ended up coming clean and saying, no, I'm a theist. And I think there are good scientific reasons for affirming theism as opposed to pantheism or materialism or deism, some of the other big worldview systems of thought. And I developed a case in the Return of the God Hypothesis for a theistic understanding of design, and suggesting that there are 3 key discoveries that point to not only a designing intelligence of some kind, but a designing intelligence that is both transcendent beyond the universe and also active within the creation after the beginning of the universe. And so those 3 discoveries taken together are, first, that the universe, as best we can tell, has a beginning. That secondly, from the very beginning, the universe has been fine-tuned to allow for the possibility of life. And thirdly, that we find inside living systems distinctive hallmarks of intelligent activity, in particular, the digital code that's stored in the DNA molecule, but also the exquisite information processing systems that are at work inside cells and the machinery that allows that information to be processed. So you have evidence of design from the beginning and along the cosmic timeline, suggesting a kind of the need for a transcendent intelligence, not an immanent intelligence, and not a space alien.
What I found important about your book as I was reading is it didn't feel like, well, hey, there's an absence of evidence. It was like, no. There's actual scientific evidence. And you'd actually have to be really hard-headed to not allow it to lead you to the possibility of an intelligent designer. Like it felt like a positive argument, a real scientific argument for the existence.
Yeah, sure, it is a positive argument, but it's also important to say from the outset that the God of the gaps objection presupposes that materialistic explanations are always better. That if you haven't explained something materialistically, that there's a gap in our understanding. When in fact, we know there are many things that are not well explained by materialistic processes and which are better explained by the activity of a mind. The objection is kind of question begging because we're trying to decide whether certain phenomena that are relevant to understanding the origin of the universe or the origin of life or the structure of the universe are better explained by the activity of a mind as opposed to the activity of undirected material processes. And when that's the dichotomy that we're investigating, it does no good to simply say we're not going to consider a non-materialistic explanation, and if you propose one, we're going to say it inherently involves positing an ignorance or a gap in our understanding. It may be that materialistic processes don't explain certain things well, and we have lots of experience of phenomena that we know are better explained, or that are because they are produced by the activity of minds as opposed to strictly materialistic processes. If you walk into the British Museum, for example, I just came from Cambridge, UK, and through London. If you walk into the British Museum and you see the Rosetta Stone there with this inscriptions on the rock, and you're an archaeologist and you want to know, well, what produced those inscriptions? And if you say, well, I'd like to say it was an intelligent scribe, but I know that would be violating the rules of science. That would be committing a scribe of the gaps argument. So therefore, I'm going to have to say it was wind and erosion. Well, you've obviously missed something, because the scribal explanation is actually a lot better. We know from our uniform and repeated experience that information, whether it's in a hieroglyphic inscription or paragraph in a book or in digital code, is always something that arises from an intelligent source. So we have positive experience, positive knowledge of a cause and effect connection there that points to an intelligent cause, not an undirected material process. And trying to stick to the convention of must explain things by reference to materialistic processes, whatever the evidence, will actually lead you astray. And if you divert from materialistic explanation and then someone says, well, but that's a gaps argument or an argument from ignorance, they're actually missing something true about reality, which is that minds do things that matter doesn't do. And when we see those distinctive things that minds do, in the absence of getting to see how they came about, we're still very rational to infer back to the activity of a mind. The point is that that's not an argument from ignorance, which is logically what's being claimed, is that any inference to intelligent design is a gaps argument, or in other words, an argument from ignorance. We're inferring to intelligence because we don't know what caused it. And the logical structure of an argument like that would be A is not capable of producing the effect in question, call it X, therefore B did it. That would be an argument from ignorance, because you're not providing any evidence that B is capable of producing X. But if instead you're saying, well, A can't produce, say, digital code or information, the kind of information that we find in DNA, and B can't do it, and C can't do it, or hasn't been known to do it, but we do know of a cause that can produce the kind of information that we see, for example, in the DNA molecule, then we have an argument from positive experience of cause and effect. And in that case, we're not making an argument from ignorance, we're making it what's called an inference to the best explanation, where a best explanation is one that posits a cause which is known to have the power to produce the effect in question. And so that's why I think you're correctly reading me as saying that we're making a positive case for intelligent design based on the causal powers of agency that we know from experience, not simply an argument from ignorance, or therefore something that would represent a true gap in our understanding.